I am Justin Hutt,
And I'm Marco Bruno.
and we are here interviewing Thomas Wamser on May 18th, 2021 in Milwaukee.
Nice to meet both of you fellows.
Yes, thank you for being able to come out, and I appreciate you for taking your time up out of your day. So yeah, we'll get into it.
All right, first, wondering where were you born?
Well, I was born in Milwaukee on January 9th, 1946. So I'm 75.
And what was it like when you grew up?
Well, when I grew up,
Yeah, like your childhood.
well, it was probably very typical of what you might think from, the sitcom Happy Days. Okay. Um, so it was, I suppose very typical, maybe even the same as it is today, but school, of course, was a big part of your life. Ride your bike to school, a lot of activities, sports activities after school, weekends, and then during the summer. So there was organized baseball leagues, like sort of like little leagues, but more on a local level. Um, Grade school, public grade schools would have supervised playgrounds during the summer with lots of activities, whether it was sports or chess or checkers. So, that took up a lot of time. And when
It was like organized, but
that, yeah, that
outside
was,
of the school year.
yeah, that was all organized, and supervisors on those playgrounds typically were college students that were out for the summer, and that was a part-time job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a really nice thing for kids because it really gave you a lot of things to do and places to go, take up your time. But I think one change, which is very different from today, is that when I grew up as a boy, I left the house at 8 in the morning. I'd have a bowl of cereal. I'd leave the house, say goodbye to my mother, and she had no idea where I was going. And I was gone for the day and then come back around supper time. So when I would leave, I'd go over to my first friend's house, whoever was closest, knock on the door. If he was around, he'd come out, and then we might go on to another friend's house and another friend's house. And maybe for the day, we'd have 3 or 4 friends, and we'd go to the playground, or we'd go play baseball, or we had a creek that ran very close to where we all lived, and that had an area in that creek that opened up to a kind of a pond, which had a large tree branch that overhung over this pond, and we called that the turtle pond. And we'd go there and jump off the limb of the tree into the turtle pond and swim. So those were kind of typical things that we did.
That's awesome.
No organized activities by our parents.
Yes, that seems a lot different than today, at
Yeah,
least.
I think that's very different.
So was it just like you had to be home when the street lights turned off, or what was your parents' rule on that?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Was your parents' rule like just be home by when the street lights come off, or did they not really care?
Well, they expected us for dinner because we always ate dinner as a family. So
Okay.
that was at 5 or 5:30, right around that time. So as long as I was home for dinner, everything was good. And then after dinner, we'd go out. Maybe it'd be in the street playing kick the can or, hide and seek or something like that. And then pretty much, when the street lights came on, it was time to come home and go to bed.
Wow. And what middle school did you end up going to?
Well, I went to a Catholic grade school, which was St. Anthony of Padua. So that was, they didn't have kindergarten, but that was first grade through eighth grade. And then high school was Marquette University High School. And then, college beyond that.
You said you played a lot of sports when you're growing up. What sports were you involved in?
Well, I played as far as organized sports, let's say grade school and high school. In grade school, we only had a basketball team. We didn't have a football team or tennis team or anything else. So I played basketball. And then in high school, I played basketball, track, and football.
Could you ever dunk?
Did I what?
Could you ever dunk a
Yeah.
basketball?
Yeah, I was one of the very few kids in high school that could dunk. I was 6'2", which I still am. I was 6'2" in grade school in eighth grade, and I never grew after that. So I was 6'2" in eighth grade, and I'm 6'2" now. And there were in high school in the Catholic conference, which was probably about 12 schools. There were, I don't know, probably a dozen players that could dunk. Most were taller than I was, but I could dunk. But my biggest problem is that my hands weren't really large, so I had trouble holding on to the ball. So I could get over the rim, but sometimes I couldn't hang on to the ball, to get it in the basket.
Interesting. And you played for your high school team as well?
Yeah, played football, track, and basketball.
And where'd you go for high school?
Marquette High School, Marquette University High School.
Is when you went to Marquette, is it different than when we were going to Marquette, or?
It's hard. It's hard for me to judge because I don't know the school that well now, as far as what the culture is. But when I was there, the majority of the teachers were either Jesuit or young men that weren't ordained yet, but were just prior to being ordained. Scholastics, they called them. So those were, young men, probably early 20s. And they taught as well as, the older Jesuits. And so that's probably different than what it is today. There were only a few lay teachers. We had corporal punishment. Okay?
What was that?
I don't know if they have that anymore, but we had a vice principal. His name was Father Boyle. And Father Boyle was about 6'5" and a very large man. And the rumor among the students, of course, not verified, but the rumor was that he was an ex-wrestler that became a Jesuit, okay? But Father Boyle was in charge of discipline. So we had two forms. One was called Jug, and Jug was an hour after school. If you did some infraction, you would be given anywhere from 1 to 5 pages of the Bible that you had to memorize word for word. And you stayed in Jug as long as it took to memorize whatever it was. So if it was 1 page, not too bad, okay? Try memorizing 5 pages of the Bible word for word. Very difficult, okay? So sometimes you might have been there a week before you'd get it recited and approved. The other form of punishment was Father Boyle had a golf club a steel shafted golf club, which he cut the head off and then taped up the end. And then he had a leather strap um, attached to the handle, and he carried that around every place he went. And if he did something maybe more severe than a jug assignment, they would send you to Father Boyle's office. And when you walked into Father Boyle's office, you walked in and you were facing his desk, and he was behind the desk. And then his desk was against the wall on the right-hand side as you walked in. And on the wall was a picture of Jesus, okay? And that picture was about waist high. So it was very low for a picture, unusually low. The reason for that is when you walked in, you were there to get swats, all right? So Father Boyle would stand up from his desk, lean over his desk, say, bend over and face Jesus. So you'd have to bend over, face Jesus, and then he'd give you swats on your butt, okay? And those hurt, okay? And they left welts, okay?
So you know from experience?
No, only from what people tell me. And if you were really bad, the last swat was over the back of your legs.
Ooh.
Yeah, and as I said, that was pretty painful. It left welts, okay? So those were the two forms of punishment. I doubt if they have that anymore.
No, our punishment is a little nicer. We still have jog, but our jog is basically stay in a room for 30 minutes. You have to write out what you did, and yeah, and then we get to leave. But that seems a little harsher.
Well, it was effective.
Oh yeah, I bet.
What was the worst thing you did to get you sent down to the drug room or Father Boyle's office?
Oh golly, I suppose the worst thing was the way that they managed attendance for classes. Is that you would change rooms for classes, and once you would get into the room for your next class and the door would close, then your teacher would take attendance of who's there. He'd mark down on a little slip who wasn't there, and then put that outside the door. Hall monitors would come around and collect those slips at the beginning of every class or after every class started, and then turn those in to Father Boyle. So that's how they kept track of attendance. Well, a couple of friends of mine figured out that what you could do would be, if you wanted to skip a class, you just wouldn't go to the class, and then you just wait until the slip was put out outside the door, and then you'd go and replace the slip and take your name off the list. So you could never report it as absent from that class. Okay, so that we did get caught. Okay, we did get swats and we did get jugged.
It's pretty funny. Did you have a girlfriend in high school?
Several.
Several. Big player?
Yeah, several. Yeah. My first girlfriend was in grade school. Okay. Janice O'Rourke. And then in high school, my first girlfriend was Pat Casey. And Pat Casey, we only were girlfriend, boyfriend for about a year, and then her parents moved to Fort Smith, Arkansas. But after Pat Casey, I had quite a few girlfriends, actually. Yeah, they came and went.
What do you recall about your, like, one of your first dates? Like, where was the typical like date spot to go?
Well, let's see. Typically, it would have been a party. Okay. I don't, I mean, I remember going to a lake, and swimming and having a campfire, after dusk. Uh, so I did that. I don't remember going to any, like professional sporting events or concerts. I don't remember that. And I don't think we had many of those. But going to the beach, downtown Milwaukee, Bradford Beach, to a lake, high school games, certainly did that. And then there were also what was called CYO dances. So that was Catholic Youth Organization. And this was a really wonderful part of growing up because every parish had a CYO organization, and almost every parish would have dances on Friday night. Okay. So on any given Friday night, there might be 3 or 4 different parishes that are holding dances, so you could choose where to go. And it didn't take long before you learned, what parishes had the best dances, the biggest attendance, and so those were always, favorites. So that was a big activity for Friday night, very common. And yeah, and the other thing that we did is we had a custard stand called Gillies, which is on 76th and Blue Mound Road. And there were a number of custard stands in Milwaukee that were sort of the hangouts for given schools. So for Gillies, that was the typical hangout for Marquette High School, Divine Savior, and when I grew up, it was Divine Savior and Holy Angels. They were separate. Later on, they merged, so now it's Divine Savior, Holy Angels. Okay.
Oh,
But when
so
I grew up, those were separate. Holy Angels was downtown Milwaukee, and Divine Savior was out, in the western suburb. So Marquette High School, Divine Savior, Holy Angels, and then Wauwatosa East, which was a public high school. Gillies was the meeting place. So not you'd be there on weekends during school, and then during the summer, you probably were there most nights of the week because the place was jam-packed. That's where all your friends would meet. And sometimes you just sat there and talked and did nothing for the rest of the night, but you had a good time with your friends.
oh,
And how did you get around? Did you have a car?
No, my parents had one car. Both my parents worked. I had an older brother and an older sister who had driver's license before me. So my opportunity of driving our one family car was pretty close to zero. Okay. But other kids that were friends of mine, their parents, might have had 2 cars. So they had access to cars. And then some kids had their own cars, but I didn't. So I was usually a passenger.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
would you
And-
bike then, or
What's
what?
it?
Would you bike or walk to events, or just get picked up by other people?
Well, grade school, you rode your bike every place. Okay. So, yeah, wherever I was going, it was by bike. High school, bikes were sort of not the in thing. Um, Not as popular, I think, as they are today for, older kids. So, in high school, then it was walk.
Okay.
So I was about 8 blocks from Gillies, so I would walk there, meet friends, maybe go someplace else, maybe not. Um, and if we were going to meet, yeah, not at Gillies, if we had some other plan for the, you know, Friday night or Saturday or something, um, I would either walk or hitchhike to my friend's house, because when I was in high school, then I had friends that were, much further away than just sort of the reach of your parish. So I would hitchhike to their house. We'd have a time to meet, or they'd come and pick me up.
Hitchhike with like strangers?
Hitchhike was standard practice. So when I went to Marquette High School, I lived on 82nd and Adler. So Adler is about 6 blocks south of Blue Mountain Road. So to get to school, I hitchhiked every day.
Every day you hitchhiked?
Every day. Yeah, every day. So I would
With
walk.
a new person every single day?
So I would walk down to Blue Mountain Road. Okay. And so that's about 8 blocks, something like that, 6 blocks. Stick my thumb out. I'd be on 84th and Blue Mountain, stick my thumb out. And of course, Blue Mountain Road was a main arterial going downtown. And I'd always wear my Marquette High jacket. Okay. So they knew where, everybody recognized that. And it didn't take 5 minutes before someone picked me up.
Wow.
And I got home the same way. Okay. So I never rode the bus. And at that time, there wasn't, all this concern about hitchhiking, and, what risk that might have been. And parents weren't at all concerned about it. So it was a very different time frame. And as I said, you never waited more than 5 minutes. Someone picked you up, you drop you off on 35th Street, and there you are.
Wow. Did you meet a lot of cool people that way, or did you just kind
Yeah,
of
it was always interesting. It was mostly businessmen, going to work. So you'd have conversations. It was always interesting. I mean, you never got to know them intimately. Sometimes, it'd be somebody that, would pick you up, more than once, because, if they work downtown, they're going there every day too. So it just, happened to work out, they came by at the time you were there.
Wow, that's crazy. I can't believe that. Well,
Were you close with your siblings when you were growing up?
Well, I had an older brother and an older sister and a younger sister. Okay. So my older brother was 6 years older than I was. So, um, he was a car guy, and I always loved cars, and he had a lot of friends that were car guys. Okay. So, he had a car long before I was even able to drive. So I'd want to hang out with them. Once in a while, he'd let me, but it's kind of like, who wants your little brother hanging out with you and your friends?
I get that.
Yeah. So from time to time, he'd let me tag along. Um, uh, but we were very different. I enjoyed sports and athletics. He did not. The car thing was probably our most common connector. So and being, 6 years older, um, uh, I wouldn't say that I was really close because we're just in sort of different moments in time, being 6 years apart. My older sister, um, growing up, who's close to your sister, I mean, really,
Yeah.
um, different, they've got a whole different agenda and interest. So I'm not particularly close that way. And then my younger sister, I was 6 years older than she was. So again, we weren't in high school together. Um, and that age difference made a difference. Today, we're, pretty close. They all live in Milwaukee. So I get to see them, uh, when I'm back in Milwaukee for the summers and falls. So I would say, we're pretty close.
That's good. Oh, when did you move down to Florida?
1992. Yeah, 1992. So just about, what is it, 20 years, huh?
Hmm.
Yeah, 20 years. No,
So
it's longer than that. Oh yeah, that would be almost 30 years. Yeah, that's about right, 1992, almost 30 years.
So a while after high school then.
Oh yeah, I was, let's see, I would have been, I think about 44. Yeah, probably right around 44.
And
Okay.
what was the reason to move down to Florida? Just warm
But
weather. What was the reason to move down to Florida? Just warm weather, or
Well, at that time, it was, really the weather, get out of the winters in Milwaukee. Um, and that was primarily, the motivation for moving. Later on, um, when I retired, okay, there were other advantages such as economic advantages because Florida has no state income tax. Wisconsin has about a 6.7% tax. If you lived in California or New York, it's about 13% or even a little bit higher than that. So when if you don't derive your income in Wisconsin or New York or California, you could move to Florida and enjoy that economic benefit, at that point. For me, because I had businesses in Wisconsin and drive my income there, even though I lived in Florida for the winter, and spring seasons, I still paid Wisconsin income tax because that's where my income was derived from. But once I retired, well, then I didn't have that anymore. So economically, Florida is a great place to be, besides the weather.
What was the name of the first business you had, and did it end up working and being successful?
First business was a business that I started from scratch, and that was called Vulcan Technologies. And Vulcan Technologies was a steel fabricating business. So I started that from scratch in 1980. Our first order, or I should say our first, I guess our first order was in September of 1980, and it was $78. We
Okay.
made something, shipped and was paid $78. And by the end of 1982, so that's roughly about 2 years, I had grown that business to about 4 million a year in revenue. So back in 1980, that was a pretty good number. That's probably equivalent to maybe 12 million today, something like that. So that was worked out very well. And then later on, in 1983, I bought a company called Beck Carton Corporation, which was a manufacturer of packaging, printing and packaging. And then in 1970, no, pardon me, in 1986, I sold the steel fabricating company, Vulcan Technologies. And in 1989, I bought another company called Transpac Corporation, which was also in the warehousing, shipping, and packaging business. So those were, and then, and then later on, I started a company called One Source Packaging and Logistics. And then at the end of 2013, I sold all those businesses and retired.
Did you start those businesses with anyone else, or was it just you?
The first business, Vulcan Technologies, I started with my dad, who had just retired from Alice Chalmers, and he had worked there for 44 years. That was the only job he ever had. So he retired and asked me if I would like it if he would help me. And he was an accountant, so that was a good skill that I didn't have. So I said, yeah, that'd be great, but if you're going to help, then we'll be partners, okay? And then the company that I worked for before I started this company, I had a person working for me that at the time was dating my sister, and he asked if he could join us in this in starting this company. So the three of us were partners. So that how that started. And then in in about 19, maybe 84 or 5, I purchased both my dad's and my future brother-in-law's interest in the company. So then I became sole owner. And then for the businesses after that, Beck Carton and Transpac and One Source, I was a sole owner.
What were some of the obstacles along the way with starting some of your own businesses?
Well, starting a business from scratch, very, very difficult. And for most businesses that people start, the biggest obstacle is that they're underfunded. Okay? And starting Vulcan Technologies, that was true as well. Okay, you just don't realize how much money it takes to really start a business and have it well funded. So that's a huge challenge. And then for me, and it's probably true for maybe most entrepreneurs who start a business at a younger age, you've got lots of ambition, but not much money and not enough experience. So it's a great learning experience. There's probably nothing that is a better learning experience than starting a business, because if you work for a company, you're in a particular area, whether it's engineering or sales or finance, whatever it might be. And that's your area of expertise. But if you're a business owner starting a company, or owning a small company, you get involved in all those areas, whether it's sales, financing, manufacturing. You really become involved in all of those different areas. So it's a great learning experience, but very difficult to do. I don't remember what the statistics are, but it's something like 90% of all new businesses fail.
Wow. 90%, you said?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very tough thing to do.
Well, you did a great job.
Yeah, well, worked very, very hard, like most people do. When I started out with that business that I founded initially, a good week was 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. And a bad week was 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you had to, put a great deal of time and effort into that. And there's no way around that, at least for most businesses. There's a few probably that, just had, some, brilliant idea and may not have been that difficult. But for most businesses it is. So it takes a great determination and a lot of commitment to do that.
It sounded like most of your businesses were like late 70s and early 80s when you're kind of starting out. But just to backtrack a little bit, where were you like during the Vietnam War, and what was your thoughts with the Vietnam War? Were you in favor of the war or not really?
Well, I think my take on that, Justin. First of all, where was I? Well, I graduated high school in '64, college in '68. So '68 to '70 was probably that period of time where there was the most turmoil and opposition to the war. Okay. And of course, you weren't around at the time, but the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968 was kind of a focal point for the opposition to the war. So you may have seen newsreels about that or read articles, but that 68 to 70 period was, the high point as far as opposition to the war. So what was my take on it? Well, first of all, I think in many cases, and this is true to today as well, you don't get all the information from the government, okay, about what the reality of things really are. It's typically has, a spin on it that promotes whatever policy they're promoting. So I don't think we got the full story on the war, but overall, my view would be that I think that it was a justified cause to try to prevent and limit the spread of communism into South Vietnam. The people didn't want that. They wanted their independence and a more democratic form of government. So I think it was a justified cause to support them. But the biggest problem that I had with the war is we did not have a commitment to win it. It was more of kind of a defensive, hold your position policy, and we never had the will and the policies to win the war. If we did, I think the war would have been much shorter, and it would have been more a more successful outcome to what it was. So if you look at the outcome, which eventually was North Vietnam taking over South Vietnam, and now the country is under a dictator communist rule. So a very bad outcome. So it's hard to justify the loss of life and the expense of time and treasure that we spent in that war without a successful outcome.
Interesting. Did you have any friends in the war or consider joining yourself?
I was what's classified as 1Y, okay? And 1Y is a medical deferment because when I was 17 in high school, I compound fractured both of my legs in a motorcycle accident. And then I had what's called intermedullary fixation pins in my legs that are basically stainless steel rods that they pound down the center of your bone and connect the broken parts so that they heal up. Well, that was a qualifying factor to make me ineligible for the draft. So it really was never an option for me. Even if I volunteered, I don't think I would have been accepted. But to answer your question, did I have friends? Yeah, I had lots of friends that were in Vietnam, and I had friends that were killed in Vietnam.
Like friends growing up with, or
What's that?
friends that you grew up with, or
Yeah, friends that I grew up with or had met, either in high school or in college. The other thing about the war too that is really kind of painful for me to think about, and that's how poorly we treated the soldiers that returned from the war, because there was a draft at the time. So, those young men and women that were drafted, didn't have an option as far as, participating in the war or not. But if they were drafted, they served honorably. But because the war was not popular, when they came back, they really didn't get the respect that they deserved for serving their country. So whether you had agreed with the war or you opposed the war, in either case, it's not relevant to the soldiers that serve. So that's really kind of a sad testimony.
What do you think they, people could have done better to, help the soldiers that came back?
They should have separated their opposition from the policies that the government, put forth as far as being there and participating in the war from the soldiers that served. The soldiers should have been treated with respect and honor when they return, and you could still oppose the war and the government, but the soldiers had nothing to do with that. So they deserve better.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's too bad. What have you learned over your lifetime you like to share with the younger generation?
Well, I would say for younger generation, establish good values, keep those as a priority, because during life you'll always face challenges and obstacles and roadblocks And if you don't have a really good foundation as to what your values and priorities are, it's very hard to get off course, if you will. So those values and priorities that are, you know, true beliefs for anyone will really sustain you in the times where you're being challenged. And for everyone's life, for most people, you're going to face those challenges, those obstacles. Okay, it's part of life, and most people have to face those. So you need that foundation, you know, to stay on course. And then as far as being, you know, in a career, trying to find success and happiness, um, uh, I've got two thoughts. One, always do your best, whatever it is that you're doing, to whatever level your particular talents will take you. If you make your best effort every day, you don't have to look over your shoulder the day after and say, you know, I could have done better. If you never have to say that, then whatever you goals you reach and wherever position in life you wind up at, you're going to find happiness because you've done your best. So if you do that, I think you'll always be happy regardless of where your life might take you.
What makes you happy?
What makes me happy?
Yeah.
Um, well, exactly what I said. That I've always felt that I put my best effort in. So whatever happened after putting that effort in, I was fine with. Whether it was turned out to be successful or whether it didn't. But as long as I felt that I made my best effort, I was always very satisfied and happy and content with where I was at. So at this point, you know, my working career is over. So what brings joy and happiness? Well, um, the fact that my wife Ann and I have been married 50 years, and we know each other pretty well, and we accept all of the faults and warts that we both may have, and are accepting. And it's just been, you know, a wonderful relationship. And then, of course, we've got two wonderful daughters, two wonderful son-in-laws, and a bunch of great grandchildren. So it's wonderful to watch how that has all developed and has brought, you know, I think, you know, happiness and respect and success in all of those cases. So that's, you know, very comforting and very rewarding and very, very enjoyable for my wife and I.
How did your relationship with Anne first start?
Well, we met at Gillies, the custard stand that I mentioned earlier. I was a senior in high school. Ann was a junior, and Ann's best friend, um, who was a grade school companion, and then they went to the same high school. Her boyfriend at the time, um, his parents were very good friends of my parents. So I knew her boyfriend, and Karen, Ann's best friend, knew who I was because of that relationship. So one day, Karen and my wife Ann and I think some other girls were up at Gillies, and I walked by, and Karen introduced Ann and I. So that's how we met.
Wow. been a long road since.
Yeah, yeah, long road since, long and happy road.
If I get this right, you are indeed Catholic.
I am.
And what role did that belief play in your life or throughout your life?
I think a very important role. What I talked about earlier about uh, values and priorities in your life that will um, really provide comfort and support in any periods of you know difficulties. Um, Religion was a very big part of that for me, and I think it was for my wife as well. So there's times when you just uh, kind of uh, give up whatever um, obstacles or difficulties you're facing. You give that up to Jesus Christ and simply say whatever um, uh, whatever your uh, plan for me uh, is fine. So it can, in difficult times.
Well, that's it with our questions. But if you want anything that you want to mention that we didn't ask, go for it. But
You covered a lot of topics there.
you did.
So I think any further discussion, of my life probably would get boring. So I think you got enough material.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much.
I do have one final question, and that is, throughout your life, do you have anything that you've regretted doing? It could be like a small thing or a big thing, but just kind of curious about that.
Oh, I think there's probably a lot of things that I could say I might regret. Uh, but I think maybe one thing that I'll mention uh, is I could have done better in school. Okay, I didn't take school very seriously. Um, so when I said earlier about um, uh, working hard and putting in your best effort and never having to look over your shoulder, um, uh, grade school, high school was a period that I can't say that I did that. Okay, so that would be a regret. I could have done better uh, in school, but I didn't work very hard at it.
Hmm. Interesting.
Now, how that might have changed my life, I don't know. Um, what my life was, including that grade school and high school experience, is all part of what uh, has made me who I am. Okay, and I have no complaint about that, and I'm very comfortable and very happy about that. So, if I had, you know, done better in high school or grade school, worked harder, put my best effort in. How would that have changed my life? I don't know. Probably would have changed it in some ways, but maybe not necessarily made me any happier. Okay, those were lessons for me that I learned. So lessons can be equally as important, whether they're positive lessons that you gain from success, or whether they're powerful lessons that you learn from failure. So both can be equally important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Wamser, for talking with us this afternoon, and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed talking to both of you fellas. Good luck and everything that you're going to do in the future. And I enjoyed it.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you again.
Have a great life.
Thank you.